Hello, everyone. I'm Barbara Hamm-Lee. You listen to his sage perspectives on current events monthly during the Another View Roundtable. But today we talk with journalist, entrepreneur, talk show host, and author Wil LaVeist from a different perspective, a very personal perspective about marriage, child rearing, love, pain, healing, and the law. Wil just wrote a new book. It's called Dear Daughter, and it's a love letter to his daughter and anyone else who wants a successful, loving, long-term relationship. A very powerful story is next on Another View, so stay tuned.
Discussing today's topics from an African American perspective, this is Another View.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Another View. I'm Barbara Hamm-Lee. If you're a regular listener of Another View, then our guest today is absolutely no stranger. Wil LaVeist is a regular on the Another View Roundtable. He's a journalist, entrepreneur, talk show host, and author, and his new book is called Dear Daughter, A Dad's Marriage Advice on Love, Pain, Healing, and the Law. Hey, Wil, you don't have your buddies with you here today.
Thank God. Thank God. I get you. I appreciate you, Barbara. Appreciate you having me on and even being willing to talk about this topic.
It is a topic that touches everyone in one way or another because we're all in relationship. But in terms of what has happened to you, it's been a very personal thing that happened to you. And for you to be able to come forth like this, I think will help a lot of people.
Well, that's the motive behind it. And unfortunately, the media, the lawmakers, for some reason do not really want to deal effectively with this issue. And so I think by telling my story and by putting it out there, as you said, my hope is that others will hear it.
One thing I noticed about you before we get into the book, and I do have a passage I want to read from it, but when you went through changes in your life in terms of job, and you wrote Fired Up.
Right.
And now you went through this personal issue and devastation, really, and rebirth, if you will, through with your marriage and your family. And you wrote another book. Is that your way of dealing with life in terms of?
Yeah, I think in part, as a writer, just like or any artist, that the material that they write music about, the material that people write poems about, oftentimes comes from their personal life. Comics, when they stand up and they're giving jokes and they're making you laugh, they're a lot of times working through their own personal issues. So in that sense, I think I'm no different.
So for those who have not had a chance to read Dear Daughter, and I hope lots and lots of people do, you were married for more than 20 years, and you got some news that really took you to your knees. Can you tell
absolutely.
Tell us what happened.
By chance DNA, as I write about in the book, a DNA test for my daughter. I learned that my daughter, my baby girl, I was there when she was born. I was the first to hold her, cut her umbilical cord. Then I learned that she's not my biological child. And there was no reason other than, there was just no reason to believe anything other than that she was my biological child.
And you raised her.
I raised her.
Time.
We were very close. She's a classic daddy's girl. We were very close.
And the only girl, right?
And the only girl. And you see me out with her.
Yes.
You've met her.
Yes,
you see me out with her all the time. I mean, we're very close. And then I find out that all these years, we've essentially been lied to and had this information withheld from us, and particularly from her, because what are we unless we know our identity,
And where
and
we
so,
come from.
and you really is essentially her identity, sense of self was stolen from her, withheld from her.
I want to read a passage, if you don't mind, from the book, because I think that this will just give our audience a sense of what was going on. When I pulled the envelope from the mailbox, I felt in my gut that the news would not be good. I sat at my kitchen table and stared at the envelope in my palms. I took a deep breath and then I prayed. I asked God, in the name of Jesus, please grant me the ability to handle these results if they are bad. I slowly opened the envelope and slowly unfolded the document. Carefully, I read the words and numbers from top to bottom. Finally, I saw it. Probability of paternity, 0%. I began to hyperventilate. I dropped the document on the table as I stood abruptly. I paused and then I paced toward my bedroom. Then I reversed and headed back to the table and then to the kitchen. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. My son, who is asthmatic, pierced my mind. After several years of rushing him to the hospital, for the first time I understood what it was like for him to have an attack. I headed to the front door and pulled the knob. I need air. I need air. This can't be. I need air. I felt myself thinking as my heart raced. I dashed outside and down the stairs, still trying to catch my breath. I began to walk and walk and walk. I need air. This can't be. I need air. This can't be. I kept thinking. To passersby, I must have looked either crazy or as if I were talking on my cell phone with an earpiece. My feet and legs and arms kept moving. Down the sidewalk, street scenes and sounds went unnoticed. I felt completely alone. I need air. This can't be. I need air. This can't be. I kept thinking. I need air. This can't be. I need air. It took my breath away. Just reading that. And I can imagine just when you think back on that time, did you ever think you'd be to this point? Because this is a very pro-marriage book.
Not at that moment, boy. Not at that moment. You just took me back as I was reading. I was visualizing all of that. And I'm thankful to God that I'm even able to sit here, and talk about it, because that was absolutely the darkest moment of my life to that point. And then as I talk about it in the book, is that it got even darker when I had to have a second test to confirm. And I had to tell my daughter the truth. And we're sitting in the car and wiping each other's tears. And I see in her eyes a deep sense of sorrow and pain that, as a parent, Yeah. And it was just something I never saw in her eyes before, and hope to never see again. And hope no one else ever has to deal with something like that.
So you got divorced, and you went through some ugly stuff with that, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But why have you been able to still be pro-marriage through all of this?
Because ultimately, the miracle in this, and when that moment happened, is that God showed me, okay, this happened. You can't change what happened. Your best path forward is what you need to be looking at for your daughter as well as for yourself. And so in the midst of that, I wanted to be angry like any normal person would want to lash out and be angry. But I've always been a person who, all the different things that I've been through, tough things in life, okay, what can I learn from this and what is the path forward? And that's where my focus got shifted. What is the path forward? Because what you do now, if you lash out, if you do these things, as we talk about the law, this is not going to play well for you. Exactly. And it certainly is not going to play well for your daughter, your children, the people in your life that you love. So I was able to start focusing and look on a path forward. Also, the ironic thing about finding that out, also in a strange kind of way, was confirmation to me for the difficulties that I'd already been experiencing throughout the marriage. It's like, because a divorce or something like that, it doesn't happen just overnight.
Exactly.
And as I talk about in the book, a lot of times the divorce happens before the marriage even happens.
Because things that you should have recognized,
deal breakers,
or dealt
all
with.
that you should have dealt with, that you shouldn't have ignored. A lot of times we get into relationships, one thing leads to another, and then we find ourselves standing at the altar and we're like, how did I get here? So it was like in a strange way, it was also confirmation. It was like, no wonder I'm dealing with some of these basic things that I thought I shouldn't be banging my head against a wall over. So it was that. And so, again, being a person of faith, God showed me that your path forward is going to be so much greater, but it depends on what you start doing now for your daughter as well as for yourself and your
What
children.
did your daughter say when you told her you were going to write this book? Because you're very careful, even though you tell what happened, you're very careful to also protect her privacy in terms of the rest of the story, if you will, and so forth. But what was her reaction?
Her initial reaction was, she knows me very well, and she kind of knew that, again, that I might be going down that road. She's also an artist herself. She's a graduate of the Norfolk School, Government School of the Arts. So she's a theater major. So she knows. And so her reaction was one, I know my dad, I know this is what he would want to do, is to put something out there that would be helpful to other people. And then her second reaction was, being resistant about her business, her story. And if she had not given me her permission to move forward, I wouldn't have moved forward at all, because it's very important that she gets her identity, her story back. Other people have written her story for her. And my role, one of the things that I share with her is that, look, I want to do my part as your father to give you all the information that you need to do to now take your story back as an adult and tell your story and go on with your life and have a happy life and tell your story fully when you see fit. And that's exactly what I've done. I've given her, she has all the information that she needs to know about her, what has happened, who is potentially who. She knows. She has all the information that she needs to do what she needs to do as an adult.
Does she have a relationship with her mother?
As far as I know, yes.
Okay.
One of the things that I've impressed upon all of my children is that, look, Bible says, honor thy mother and thy father, so that your days will be long. In other words, so that your life can be prosperous.
Right.
So
Exactly.
to disrespect the mother, the woman who has given them life, who birthed them, I wouldn't stand for that as well. And I have, the great model that I have for that is my own father, who had a very tough upbringing, who had a very tough relationship with his mother, who in the middle of depression sent him away to the islands to be raised, thinking that, she would be able to see him at another time. He didn't come back. He didn't get after being sent, he was around 5 years old. He didn't see his mother again until he was at 20 years old.
Wow.
And he modeled for me. She lived to 90-something years old, and I watched him, and he modeled for me and for all of my siblings how to take care of your parent at an elderly age. He was the only one that was there for her, along with his grandchildren, to take care of her at that age. But he went through his entire, teens, all these
everything.
critical years, not knowing his mother, looking up at the sky, waiting for his mother to come back to him.
Wow. So our lives and things that happen to us when we're young, because your parents divorced.
Yes.
And that, you say, played a role in discovering who you were as you started to date and as you started to grow up.
Absolutely. Subconsciously, their divorce, their relationship impacted me. They divorced, I was 12. And, I was the last one of a total. My father had a total of 6 children, 4 with my mother, and I'm the youngest. So they were gone, off to college. My brother is closest in age to me. He's 4 years older than me, was transitioning into college. So I spent...
So you were home by yourself with
my
them.
mother. So I spent a lot of time with her, saw a lot of what she went through. She'd gone through a divorce. She was in her 50s. She was our age now. And, oops, I wasn't supposed to say that, Barbara.
That's okay.
But you think about that. She's going through a divorce. She's dealing with things like menopause. She came from another country. All these aspirations, came from the Dominican Republic, things she wanted to do with her life. Now she's going through a divorce. We living in Brooklyn, Brownsville, in the projects. And she's now having to remake her life and has got this young son, 12 years old, 14 years old, 16 years old. What do you do?
So what did you think marriage was supposed to be about? Then based on, growing up with a single parent, based on what you saw your dad do, based on all the factors that were happening. So when you get to college age, dating age, marriage age, what did you think you were supposed to be about? And how did you discover who you really were?
I thought it was supposed to be, because a lot of what I did see up until the time they divorced was what I thought was healthy. We had the images on television. So I thought marriage was supposed to be about 2 people coming together, supporting each other, raising a family together, so forth and so on. I didn't know, some things, how I was affected subconsciously, like I write about in the book, of how my view towards relationships, and I was sort of that shining armor, Mr. Fix-It.
You were coming
type
in
of
to
person.
save the day.
Yeah, I'm saving the day, because part of it was subconsciously I had seen all of the difficulties that my mother went through, her pain, her struggles, and I was exposed to a lot of things as a young kid, adult stuff that I really shouldn't have been exposed to. So I'm sort of in that I was in that caregiver mode. at an early age, going through my teens. So quite naturally, I started realizing that, in my relationships, some of the, women that I had relationships with were fitting in that I perceived to be somebody that needed to be fixed or somebody needed to be taken care of. And I didn't know that consciously, I was looking for Claire Huxtable. I mean, straight up, that's what we came up.
That's what we were told to go get.
Consciously, that's what I was looking for. But subconsciously, I was looking for drama.
And that's what you found.
And that's what I got.
For real.
Yeah.
440-2665 or 1-800-940-2240 are the numbers to call. We're talking about relationships and about marriage. The author of the book is Mr. Wil LaVeist, and the book is called Dear Daughter. It's a dad's marriage advice on love, pain, healing, and the law. So the first letter that you write to your daughter in the book is about getting to know yourself. So what do you tell her?
Well, what I'm basically telling her is that, don't you even begin to try to go bond with someone else unless you have a clear understanding of who you are, your own identity, or at least, have a sense of where you may be going in your own dreams and aspirations. Because when you connect with someone, you don't want to give yourself up and be totally engrossed in what they're saying they're trying to do.
That's not fair to either one
Exactly.
of them.
Exactly. Yeah. You start, your expectations levels start going up. This person can't possibly meet all of your expectations. So have a clear sense of where you think you may want to go in your own individuality, and bring that individuality to the marriage, and don't ever totally give it up. Now, again, just like working in any organization or any team, you have to now come together as to what is the goal of the team. But you still need to be able to function as an individual, just as the body has arms, legs, head, each part has a function. But they don't get into each other's lanes. They function for what is in the best interest of the body.
So in the book, you talk a lot about counseling.
Yes.
And about how important it is for you personally, before you get into the marriage.
Absolutely.
And so forth. But Will, as you and I, and we've talked about this before, so counseling is like a 4-letter word in the Black community. So, first, how did you get to be comfortable with the idea of counseling? And then talk to our audience about why you feel that is something that really is important, and we need to change our mindset about how we feel about counseling and how it can help us.
Well, absolutely. I mean, one, it helps to have a sister. My sister, Pam Bell, is a minister, pastoral counselor up in the Baltimore area. It helps to have an older sister who is a counselor and who had been my counselor over, the course of years. So that kind of exposure, for one, helps. And then two, just recognizing that, look, we don't all have it figured out and don't all have it together. And so there's a lot of things, like I share subconsciously, that may be going on with you. There's a lot of things that your family background has to do with who you become as an adult. And if you don't come to peace with certain things, you are inevitably going to pass on those dysfunctions, those problems to the people who you claim, you say that you love.
And it's not about blaming.
Exactly.
In terms of, because some people say, well, all you want to do is blame the mother, or all you want to do is blame the father, or whatever. But it's more about discovering how it affected you and how you can make that change.
Absolutely. One of the things I talk about in the introduction of the book, and who actually helped shape this book, is I met with some women who were in counseling, actually a counseling team with my sister, who were in counseling, recognizing that they had what we call daddy issues, and we put a bad name on that, daddy issues. Women who have had dysfunctional relationships with their fathers, either they weren't around or they were present and were dysfunctional. And she asked me to come there and talk to them and give sort of male's point of view of relationships and things. These are women who are having struggles in their relationships, having struggles in work, their careers, what they want to do. And as I shared with them my story, there wasn't a dry eye in the room. The women got it immediately. They saw themselves as daughters. They saw themselves in the role as a mother. They saw themselves as spouses. And so it was really after that, and the questions that they began asking me about wanting my perspective and asking, what you might feel are embarrassing questions, we sat and really dialogued and was honest with each other. And it's really what they were asking me that began to shape. And I saw, oh, this is, again, what's the path forward? This is what the book really needs to be about. And my key message is, especially for women, the eureka moment was when the women who had daughters, the mothers there, realized, oh, wow, my daughter is having some of these same issues. I transferred my pain to my daughter. Just as I share about how I was impacted by my parents and what happened, they saw I'm transferring my pain to my daughter. Some of them may have had men in their lives and they got issues with the daughter's father, the child's father. I'm telling my daughter that their father is no good. Yeah. Now, how is this affecting the daughter when it's time for her to engage in a relationship? Mm-hmm. These are the things they began to see. And that's what made me realize, oh, this is exactly where we need to go with this.
So in the Black community, because the single parent households are so prevalent, and African American men, a lot of them are not involved in their daughters' lives. Talk about why then it is so critical for men to be a part of their daughters' lives.
It's so critical
because we always talk about the man helping their sons,
right?
But talk about that daddy-daughter connection.
It's critical. It's critical because men provide their daughters a sense of security, a sense of identity. They're the first role model in terms of their relationships, their intimate relationships, as well as, how they will begin to relate to people of the other gender. I spoke recently, about 2 weeks ago, with a group of men, an event put together by the Girl Scouts, talking about foresight. The Girl Scouts, this traditional organization here in this area, recognizing that a lot of young girls do not have their fathers in their lives or do not have biological connections, and that the men in their lives need to be brought in and to discuss and to realize how important they are in a positive way. And I talked to them, and it was amazing to see these men, beautiful to see them. It brought back memories of me engaging my daughter, working on Legos, doing things, drawing, doing things like that, and to see the joy that's in the daughter's face. So daughters connect with their fathers differently than they connect with their mothers. It doesn't mean that they don't love their mothers or they don't model their mothers, but the father's relationship is very, very critical. And I saw it in my own relationship with my daughter, reinforcing in her, no, your beauty on the inside is what is really most important, your character, those sorts of things, and being able to hug her and nurture her in a way that's not, sexual all the time. And it gives her a sense of standards. Who, when it comes time to pick a mate, if that's what she chooses to do, what's the standard? How should I be treated? And when they don't have that, now you're left to picking up examples on the street, examples in pop culture, and these reality TV shows of what we see that's going on. Again, it's entertainment. But for people who don't have that, this becomes the model. This becomes, I guess, especially when it's reality TV, which you and I know it's scripted.
Yes.
But it has a perception that it's actually real.
Absolutely.
So that's the danger in it, potentially. So when they don't have a model, like my daughter, she can sit and watch reality TV all she wants, but she knows the real relationship that she had with me. Mm-hmm. So that's what you're left to.
If you're just joining us, we're talking with author Wil LaVeist, and he is the author of Dear Daughter, A Dad's Marriage Advice on Love, Pain, Healing, and the Law. Let's take a call from Michael in Portsmouth. Hi, Michael. You're on the air. Oh, I guess we just lost Michael. Okay. So the chapter 1 is to get to know yourself first and to really spend some time figuring out who you are. And you talked about putting in the universe what you want. No, how did you say that?
Yeah, putting out there what you want instead of what you don't want.
Instead of what you don't want.
A lot of times, so for example, if you had a dysfunctional father, which a lot of this message is for women, but there's also, a powerful message for men as well, you'll start saying, I don't want a man like my dad, or I don't want a man like this. A lot of times when you start emphasizing what you don't want, that's exactly what you end up getting coming through the back door, what you don't want.
So put out in the universe
what you do want. So put out there
what
you do want. So I say, if there's anything, you look at your relationship with your parents or whatever, what are the 3 things about your parents, whether it's your mother or your father, that you really like, that you really love and appreciate. Those are the things that when you are as an adult that have been implanted in you, those are the things that you're going to be looking for to be reinforced in your relationship, as opposed to saying, this is what I don't want, this is what I'm running. When you run from something, what happens? When you back away and you run from something, what happens? You end up banging into a wall because you can't see. You can't see where you're going.
That's right.
So this is why I say turn to where you are going and look at what you want and gravitate towards what you want.
All right, let's see if we can get Michael back on the phone again.
Yeah.
Hopefully we're not having phone issues. Hi, Michael, you're on the air.
Yes, ma'am. I'm sorry about the first incident.
No problem.
Yes. It's been a long time established. The expert said that fathers, not mothers, fathers are very important for young girls growing up in the home. But I just want to get to this, and this is to the author. I like to say, sir, and you probably know this already, but God is in control. And there are reasons why some people, unfortunately, have to have sadness, because this sadness gives them strength for what is needed later on for a grandchild. Sometimes that father, you are the father in sense of raising your daughter, but maybe it was best that you were the man in her life and not her actual father, if you know what I mean. God has a design. There's reasons why things happen. And due to those problems, people have certain strength that they wouldn't have had. Because, see, now, because of your strength that you have now, it's going to be passed on to your grandchild.
Okay. All right.
That grandchild may be somebody in history later on. You never know, because of the strength that is needed to be passed.
Okay.
I'm just saying.
Thank you, Michael. We appreciate that. We'll respond.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
He's speaking to, and Michael, I definitely appreciate that. Is he's speaking to the path forward? He's exactly right. That's what God showed me. What is the path forward? How do you want this to play out? How do you want this to be? But I would also caution him, again, being a person of faith, I would caution him to, as we look at this too, that there are people who are not necessarily believers in God, who also need to understand that when things happen to you, that you have to be able to look at, okay, what is the path forward? Yeah. How do I can't change what has happened, because as I write about in the book, there was a man of God who is also a officer of the law, who is very much involved inappropriately in my marriage. I talk about that in the book. They're in court, in the situation in the court, you had a preacher who is supposed to be a Christian preacher, or every Sunday telling people how they should live and what they should do. And he's also a state trooper in the state of Virginia who was involved inappropriately in my marriage.
Right, exactly.
So, again, I caution that there are people who have very much been wounded by the church, wounded by people who talk about God and so forth and so on. And this is people that your listeners know. Right. Your listeners know. There are people who are in this church right now, or this Sunday, who are going to be in this church being told how they should behave. And I had to subpoena him, and I had to subpoena his wife.
Wow. I tell you. So let's talk, since you talked about the subpoenaing and so forth, let's talk about what happened to you in terms of the law.
The fiasco.
Because, yes.
The legal technicality system.
The legal technicality system, as you call it. Because obviously, after all this came about, you and your wife decided to get divorced. Or you decide. I don't know. Which one did you guys go to?
It actually came about in the midst of the process. It actually came about.
Okay.
So just for people to understand, right? When we're talking about an issue of paternity fraud can happen to a man or a woman, but primarily happens when a woman has a child for another man outside the marriage and leads the man to believe that is his biological
leads
child.
The husband to believe.
Leads the husband to believe his biological child. Now, in the state of Virginia, right, once you have only up until 2 years So by the time the child is age 2, to be able to find out whether or not this is the case. So you are presumed, in a marriage, the husband is presumed to be the father. So having found this out after that 2-year period,
after the 2-year period.
After the 2-year period, I can no longer now get an annulment. So paternity fraud is grounds for an annulment. Okay,
an annulment means that the marriage never happened.
Never happened. Okay. So without that, now no longer being able to get an annulment, my only other option is a divorce based on adultery. And so that's what I was faced with. And so I had to go in through court, showing evidence of adultery and all of this and that and the other with my attorney. So we thought we proved that. We had, I just said, I had to subpoena people who were involved in an adulterous relationship. I had a situation when people raised their hand to God under oath, so they're going to tell the truth, whole truth, nothing but the truth, and admit it. So I had the defendant admitting adultery. I had the alleged paramour. I got to say alleged now because of the ruling of Judge Jones, Gerald Jones, alleged paramour admitting that it happened. So in the middle of the case, in the middle of my attorney, making the argument, Judge Gerald C. Jones, Circuit Court, Norfolk Circuit Court, former legislator, guy who's ruling over my case, stops him in mid-sentence and says, okay, you've proved adultery. Essentially, I quote directly from the transcript. By the way, all of what I'm talking about is hidden in open view because this is all public record.
Exactly.
So
that's what I'm saying. And that's why I'm comfortable with you talking about it, because we did not ask Judge Jones to be here in defense of what he did, but that's not the point. The point is this is all what happened in
this
court,
is what happened.
And it's all public record.
And this is all public record, and these are your public servants that your tax dollars go to support. So he stops my attorney and says, okay, you proved adultery. What else do you have? So my attorney's like, this is what we came here to do. This is the only other option. Let me wrap up the case. Then at the end of the case, when it's time to issue his ruling, he says, well, you didn't prove adultery because you didn't establish the date and the time.
So is that
my attorney and I looking at us? My attorney looking at us like he's got to be kidding me. He's got to be kidding, right?
So is that a part of the proving of adultery? In other words, is there a 1, 2, 3 equals adultery and date and time you have to prove?
Well, we don't know. I really, he didn't issue an opinion. And when we sought to appeal it, the clerk who looked at it in the appellate court, that's another thing that people should recognize. The appellate court, you don't necessarily get an actual judge that's looking at your case. Ding, ding. It's a clerk a lot of times because of the level of cases. But the clerk refused to look at the transcript where Judge Jones said this because of a technicality. Procedural, the technicality was procedural default, something to the effect that my attorney didn't cite properly a particular case to warrant his argument about Judge Jones saying you proved adultery and then coming back later and saying, well, you didn't prove adultery. And the interesting thing is that this is all public record. This is open. And as I was working on this book, and even after, as I've had book signings, I've talked to several attorneys who, again, off the record, when I said this or when they read this and saw this, they said to me, here's my Judge Jones story.
Well, do you think that men in general get a raw deal, if you will, compared to women when it comes to divorce court and when it comes to
I think the evidence shows that, but I think the bigger problem is that men, when it comes to issues like this, somehow get a brain freeze. Our legislative branch, our judicial branch, a lot of times men get a brain freeze when it comes to these issues of fairness, and it's the women who see these issues, such as yourself, and see this as like, oh no, this is a problem. So just like I write about in the book, and I went even as far as testifying before the Senate Courts and Justice Committee on this issue
Trying to see if
of
we could get
paternity
a paternity fraud.
And I think Mamie Locke, Senator Mamie Locke, who I sat in office and shared this story, and she immediately got it. She saw that this is not a male versus female issue. This is an issue of what is happening to the child, what is happening to another human being. And she produced a bill, Senate Bill 1490, I think 1495,
Yeah, I think
that
so.
sought to update the laws paternity fraud, because we now have DNA evidence. We have so much more evidence and ability to really
and
get to the
different ways
truth
that
of things.
people are having children now
Exactly.
too.
Exactly.
Between in vitro and same-sex couples having
Exactly.
children. I mean, the law
needs to be
has
updated.
to
And
keep
these
up.
men sat there, with puzzled look, and I knew that they were going to do nothing. I believe that she also knew that they were going to do nothing, but she did what she should do as a public servant, identify there's a problem and try to do something about it. So Virginia State Legislature knows it has a problem with its laws not being updated as it pertains to this, but refuses to do nothing. I think a majority of the reason why that is the case is because you got a lot of men there who get a brain freeze when it comes to this, and you got lawyers who, quite frankly, let's be honest, they profit off the law being convoluted. Is when the law is
Because the longer-
convoluted,
yeah,
right?
'cause the longer
more
it takes.
the more it's convoluted, the more you need a lawyer to wade your way out, and the more you're paying.
You even said in the book that someone may have suggested you go the civil route to in suing your spouse,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
that you could get either $1,000 or $10,000, and it costs $5 to hire the
Yeah.
attorney. So
Exactly.
cost-wise, it just didn't make sense.
That's why I call it the legal technicality system. It's really, people need, and that's another reason why I wrote the book and I talk about and the law, because people need to understand that the legal system is not really about justice. It's about revenue. It's about who can pay. It's about so the state doesn't have to pay. Like you said, Judge Jones comes out of the family court system where it's about trying to find a dad who's going to pay so that the state doesn't have to pay. And, his wife, Lynn Simmons, is in that system as well. And this is how people operate. Now, is every lawyer this way? Is every judge that way? No. You've got a judge. I cite a case in the book, a judge out of Charleston, Virginia, who looked at a similar case where they were not married and said where it was found that the woman said it was the father, is not the biological child. He was on the hook for $200 a month in child support. The judge said, this is grossly unfair.
Right.
I'm going to reduce this to $1. Mm-hmm. I make that point in the book that I say, okay, so if they were married, then what? What would the judge have had to do? Should the woman still be eligible for alimony?
Exactly.
That's the case that I'm dealing with. Why am I paying alimony for someone who committed an act that, according to the law, is grounds for an annulment to say that the marriage never existed? Why am I still paying alimony?
Because you couldn't prove the annulment because the law has not kept up.
Didn't allow me the opportunity. Right.
Let's go to the phones.
Right.
Daniel Doyens is from Newport News. Hi, Daniel. You're on the air.
Hi. Thank you for taking my call.
Sure.
I had a quick question on what you were touching on earlier about that parental dysfunction sometimes growing up. And I was wondering if you had any recommendations from the child's point of view, their perspective, and growing up and identifying those dysfunctions, recommendations on addressing those with the parent, discussing those things with the parent, and trying to get to the bottom of whatever those dysfunctions may be and how to resolve them and maybe maturing together.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
All right, go ahead.
I would say, depending on your relationship with the parent, you can attempt to do it one-on-one. If you think it would actually lead to a more volatile situation, a parent just going into denial, I would recommend trying to do it in the context of a counseling session with a professional or a mediator type situation where someone who's trained to be able to discern what's actually being said and what's actually meant and has experience with this, and that can get you to a point of healing. And that's a lot of what I talk about in the book. I don't propose to be a counselor. I'm saying go to counseling. You can learn from my experiences, but take your situation, see yourself in my book, and then get to counseling. So I would recommend it being done with a mediator, preferably someone who knows neither one of you, who has no skin in the game concerning either side, is not going to be picking sides, and a good counselor who can help you mediate.
And who can really listen. Let's go to Benson in Virginia Beach. Hi, Benson. You're on the air.
Hi. Thank you for this show, by the way. It is really, really great.
Thank you.
I'm a dad I have 2 girls, and I'm married. And number one, my wife is like the most precious thing that ever happened to me.
It's beautiful.
And my 2 daughters, they are amazing, actually. But there's something I've noticed. I've noticed that my oldest daughter, she's just 3 years old, when her mom says, don't do this, she will still go ahead and do it. And once you say, Daddy, I will say Daddy, she'll be like, oh, no, I will stop. So that shows me how much girls respect their dad, and how much, if the dads are not present in the lives of their children, the girls might actually not experience this nurture as they grow up.
Right.
So I really do appreciate, this show, because I was raised by, of course, I love my dad. He was like one of my best friends ever before he passed. And, of course, by my mom together. And I know the impact parents, father and mother together, plays in the life of a child.
Absolutely.
So definitely, this is definitely one of the best shows I've actually heard. And I'm not trying to secret it, but it's really true.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for, bringing up this issue. And I really wish we Black people stay married, stay engaged in the life of our girls. Both got, the sons and our girls at the same time. So
absolutely.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Benson. We appreciate that.
Buy the book, Benson. Appreciate it. But he's absolutely right. And I would also encourage him to make sure that he and his wife present a united front to the children. So as he sees his daughter reacting when she hears Daddy that way, don't take that to mean, Daddy has more power. And he's not saying it. He's saying he recognizes his impact. Mm-hmm. I would say, look at that and say, okay, let me make sure that my wife and I are on a united front, so that even when Daddy's not around, that daughter will respond positively and effectively to mom as well. So reinforce each other, be a united front.
When you look back on, you talk in chapter 2 about warning signs, and you get what you see.
Yes, you do.
When you look back on your own relationship, on your own marriage, did the bells just start going off like crazy? Going, why didn't I pay attention? And why didn't you pay attention?
Well, people who know me from back when I was in my late 20s or so, and were talking to me at the time, have reminded me, we told you certain things, and you were saying certain things at that time. And so I think what I learned and what I talk about in the book is this issue of following your gut. So again, because of some of the subconscious things that were going on with me, I wasn't trusting my gut that was already telling me what I shouldn't do and what I didn't like and what wasn't going to work for me. So I was glossing over it. And that's what we do. A lot of times women make that mistake of glossing over things, saying, oh, I'm going to change him. Oh, he's this way now, but he's going to change. And men, we do it as well.
Grown people.
You can't change you can't change grown people. And you don't have a right to change grown people. Grown people have a right to be the way they want to be. So if you can't engage somebody in a relationship and allow them to be themselves and you be yourselves, and you can't coexist on that way, then you don't need to be together.
You talk also, we got about 3 minutes left. You talk about thinking about, I know, doesn't it go by quickly? You talk about thinking about paying attention to things like how you want to handle your finances. What about child rearing? Answering those types of questions. Some people say, well, if you're in love, that'll all work out. I take it you don't agree with that sentiment.
Again, like I said, I went back to, the women in that counseling group and the kinds of questions they were asking me. And that's what really built the book. But no, when you start looking at things like politics, money, sex, religion, those are the things that will send people who really believe that they're in love. That'll send you in the midst of, a war with a snap of a finger. And so what I try to point out is addressing those hot button issues and how you should look at them. But that the most important thing is, it's not so much what I recommend and doing exactly what I say, but it's about you looking at what's going to work for you, what's going to work for your spouse, having a conversation about it, and working it out together. So absolutely, I look at those hot button things that, will reveal to you that there's a problem that you probably should have never gotten together in the first place. And so if you can work your ways through those.
One of the things that you said in the book was take a ride with someone for an hour and where you're not sure where you're going.
I know you had a good time with that.
I did. I
you
had
and
to
Maxie,
I travel a lot. and what happens and how you react to that situation
Absolutely,
as a gauge for whether or not you can get along.
Yeah, and the reason why I talk about that is a lot of people say, you should live together as a test run to learn. You don't learn about somebody by living with them like that. No, because people still put up a front. But when you are not living together and you take a ride like that and your guard gets down and it's a long ride, you start acting like how you really act. So again, it's a metaphor for life together. You're in a car, you're on a journey, you're on the same space together, you're not sure where you're going. How do people handle situations? Or is a person nagging you about making a left turn, making a right turn? I talk about a book. Are they stepping on the brake every time? That'll tell you something about, your relationship and how you feel about each other.
Okay. Less than a minute. Are you dating now?
Oh, absolutely. I've been blessed to have a very beautiful woman in my life for the past 2 years now who is 180 degrees away from where I was. And a big reason is that I started looking at what were the things that I really loved about my mother and looking for that in a woman. And the things like I talk about in the book, my mother loved music. She loved to dance. She loved to sing. She was one of the people who cooked. And the type of person who cook and express their love through their cooking. These are the things that I started looking at. And these are the kind of things that this woman possesses.
The book is called Dear Daughter, A Dad's Marriage Advice on Love, Pain, Healing, and the Law. It's by Wil LaVeist. Wil, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your very personal story with the hopes that we can help others.
Appreciate you.
Absolutely.
Appreciate you,
and we'll be right back.
Hello, this is Spike Lee. What's happening? And you listen to Another View.
So, Wil, you used a local publisher for this book.
Yeah, Kohler Books, which is based in Virginia Beach. John Kohler, the owner. They recently had a big release of a book, Papa John's Pizza. He wrote his memoir. So this very much is a Virginia story, as I talk about, local publisher doing great work, as well as, like I said earlier, about the issues of, the law, Virginia law. Right. And so I think, as a Virginia resident, people should really be interested in this book and knowing that this product is coming right out of the state.
So I know you're an investigative journalist and you do a lot of stuff. Are you going to become a crusader, if you will, an advocate for making the change with the paternity fraud and the law, or you think you're just going to?
Well, as I talk about in the book, I went and testified. I knew that the legislature would do nothing. They didn't disappoint me. I'm available to speak. I'm available to speak. I'm available to share my story. I'm available to talk to groups. But honestly, as a former, reporter and journalist, I have a huge respect for the public's right to know. I don't have a lot of faith in our legislators because I know what their motivations are. Nor do I do in the court system. I don't advise people to take law in their own hands, but I will advise people, do not go into court thinking that it's about justice. Don't prepare yourself as best you can, but don't go in there believing that you're watching Judge Judy on TV or something.
And that's a whole nother story that we can talk about soon. But thank you so much for spending this past hour with us, listening audience. If you'd like to hear this show again or share it with a friend, we're simply a podcast away. You can find our podcast on our website, anotherviewradio.org, and any other place you go for audio listening. We're on Facebook, so like us, and I'm on Twitter at Barbara Hamm-Lee. Our theme music was composed and performed by Jay Sinnott. Lisa Godley is on vacation, so Hannah Martin stepped in as our show producer. Victor Bowen is our audio engineer, and Trey Watson answered our phones. I'm Barbara Hamm-Lee. Thank you so very much for listening to Another View.